We have guests in the studio here, local guests talking about a local topic. But one thing that came up, and I'm not sure if this has anything to do with, legal stuff, but the end of the Missoula Osprey game last night, the Osprey were well on the way to winning the Pioneer Championship, and all of a sudden, thump, the lights went out. It was discovered, KPAX reported, that there was an evil beaver.
Well, did they discern its fate in the afterlife? I mean, how did they know it was evil?
Well, when a beaver bites into a power line, woohoo!
I think the power line invoked its justice immediately upon the beaver.
But anyway, that's what happened. But in case you're wondering why the power went out, it was according to KPAX, it was a beaver. So
our law firm does the flyways for Flagship, and I think that we owe quite a bit of money this year for all the home runs that they hit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think we're going to be...
So, wait, was it timed so that we didn't see a home run? Are you guys behind the beaver?
We hit our limit, so we just pulled the plug.
All right, well, in the studio with us this morning, we have Quentin Rhoades and Nicole Siefert. It's good to have you guys here. How's the baby, by the way?
The baby's doing great. She sleeps through the night, which is more than I can say for my 3-year-old son. He still doesn't sleep through the night, but the baby's doing great.
But what the heck? I'm a little bit beyond that stage. But anyway, but the reason we're here is we're going to talk about all sorts of things. There have been, it's been a tumultuous couple of years for the Missoula County Sheriff's Office and for Missoula County in general. Lots of things have happened with a very contentious election. Anybody who goes back and looks at all the news headlines, before the primary and who was a real Democrat and who wasn't a real Democrat and who was a fake Democrat and that everybody had to run as a Democrat because nobody would ever elect a Republican. So we're going to say, you know what I mean? It's around and around. And you look back and it just kind of seemed like if you will, somebody wrote a sketch for Saturday Night Live, and there it was, And although all of it was deadly serious, and there were some really serious things that happened during that election. And I know your law firm is right in the middle of trying to help work all these things out. So, Nicole, I know you're involved. So are you, Quentin? Who wants to start talking about this? So
it definitely was a contentious election. But in the office, it was supposed to be business as usual.
Right.
And what happened was when the new administration took over, it wasn't business as usual. We compete out in, when we're campaigning, there were some things said, but when we go to work, we're supposed to go to work.
Sure.
And some of the contention from the election transferred into the day-to-day work.
And I think some of the criticism that occurs, especially in a law enforcement situation, is that this is different than, say, a law office or a grocery store or even just some normal, like even the mayor, or you know what I mean? Because we're talking about public safety, and people are concerned that whatever's going on for someone being elected, I need to know that when I make that 911 call, I don't care who comes. I just want to make sure they get there and that my family's going to be safe. So,
absolutely.
So do you think that was put at risk during this election?
I think it was put at risk following the election when some of the and actually during the election, some of the discrimination happened after the primary election before the general election. It started right away, and then it continued once the new administration took over. Right. And that did put the public at safety, and that's a problem. And it's detailed in the investigative report through the Human Rights Bureau.
I'd like you to do your job as a lawyer and convince us of discrimination, because if you talk to the city and the county, I should say, when you talk to the county, they say there wasn't discrimination, that T.J. McDermott used his powers as sheriff rightfully, and that there was nothing wrong with what he did. And so I guess I'd like to have you kind of explain to us what was wrong. What was the discrimination?
Especially according to the reports that, some investigators had to come through. So, Quentin, go ahead. Quentin Rhoades, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk to that for a second. Nicole and I are advocates, and we've been involved in a case here recently where we got it resolved, and we reached a resolution with the county between Captain Dominic and the sheriff's office and the county attorney's office, and everybody seemed tickled at the end, which is kind of odd for litigation. We don't necessarily expect that, but we got that in this case. But we've got a different story with Josh Clark. And again, we're advocates, and we talk to the reasons that we think Josh Clark is right and the reasons that we think the sheriff is wrong, and that's our job. But if you look at the investigative report that came out, the discrimination that is described and the retaliation is that's described was the decision to put Josh Clark on the graveyard shift as in the lowest level that he was eligible to be in the level that every other deputy sheriff in the department was eligible to be in at the bottom, based on reasons not including merit. So, that's what we've been arguing. But again, we're advocates. Well, the finding here by the investigator is that decision was made on grounds other than merit. And when you make a decision to move someone somewhere, a personnel decision on grounds other than merit, then you're discriminating. And in this case, also the finding was retaliating.
Well, allow me to ask this: what should the right decision have been when former Undersheriff Clark, he was Undersheriff under Carl Ibsen, and then ran for election and was defeated in the primary, but decided to run as a write-in candidate for the general election. So there was another added piece to the puzzle there. And so once that election was over, what should have happened between Sheriff-elect McDermott and Josh Clark?
Well, the tradition in the Sheriff's Department here in Missoula County, we've been blessed by this, has been in these political campaigns or election campaigns for the contestants to strive mightily but eat and drink as friends. And at the end of the election, then people go back to their old jobs in the old positions, or the new job if they get elected in the new position, and everyone treats each other as respected colleagues and friends. That didn't happen in this case. At least that's our contention, and I think the finding of the investigator supports that. Now, what should have happened was what's always happened in the past is the undersheriff goes back to his old job or her old job, and that's happened before, and it's happened every time for 25 years. And in the history that we know of, it's always happened that the undersheriff has done one of two things: he or she is either retired at the end of the sheriff's term or has gone back to the old position. In this case, the old position was open. Josh Clark had been the captain in charge of professional standards. That position was open. You didn't have to move anybody out of the position.
Because Brad Giffen had retired.
Because Brad Giffen had retired, and it's interesting to see his testimony that's recorded by the investigator, in his treatment and why he retired. It's for similar reasons as Josh Clark. And so in this case, the tradition was not followed. Things that had always been done in the past were not done. And so consequently, we could see what should have happened.
Okay. We're going to take a little break here. 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. I know this is a painful thing to talk about. It's a sensitive thing to talk about. But it has happened in Missoula. This is our town. This is our community. It's our sheriff's department. It's our police department. So anyway, if you have a comment or a question, give us a call, 721-1290, and we'll be right back. And we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Now, John, you wanted to make a quick comment here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to get the response to a challenge. It's the same challenge that the county has, right? So we have this situation where the new sheriff, T.J. McDermott, comes to power. Josh Clark gets demoted, if you will, from being the, kind of a political head with the sheriff as undersheriff, right? And the county says, hey, he doesn't deserve to go back to being a captain. The sheriff has the right to choose his captains. So it's no slight to send him back to where he was before he was a captain and go back to the patrol where he was before. So why is this a big difference? Why should this be a problem?
Two reasons. One, the investigator found that while the sheriff might be able to do that, why that might be within the sheriff's purview, that he did it for discriminatory reasons. So sure, you can, Quentin and I can decide who does what job at our law office, absolutely, and the sheriff can decide who does what, underneath him, but you have to do it for decisions based on merit and qualifications.
And what evidence is there that it was discriminatory? I mean, did he sign it because you're not a real Democrat? Boom.
Well, there's a lot of evidence.
Okay.
One thing that the investigator pointed to was who contributed.
Now, before you say this,
Yes.
Who was the investigator, and who were they who were they working for?
Sure. So the investigator was Josh Manning.
Okay.
And he's with the Montana Human Rights Bureau.
Okay, so this is an investigation conducted by the Human Rights Bureau.
Correct.
And what brought them into this? Was this requested by you, or?
We filed, when you have a complaint against an employer based off of any sort of discrimination, you have to go through Human Rights.
Sure, yeah.
So we filed our complaints through Human Rights.
Right.
And we sent them our complaint and all our evidence, and the county did the same. All their evidence to the contrary, saying, no, this isn't discrimination. The investigator went and interviewed all the parties and a few third-party witnesses, and then came up with this investigative report.
Okay, so please continue.
The reason that the investigator found that there was discrimination, and we agree, is because the sheriff made decisions on who he wanted to promote based off of political reasoning. The two captains he promoted were the biggest contributors to his campaign. So that was one thing that the investigator found, that his decisions were based not on qualifications and merit, but based off of political ideas. And that Josh Clark had ran against him, was the only person who ran against him, and was demoted and has a outstanding personnel record.
Well, so there was a third person, Bob Parcell, also was in the primary.
Correct,
In the primary.
but he was not in the Missoula County Sheriff's Office.
Right, okay.
So Clark ran against McDermott and lost, and then is demoted, and the sheriff could not cite any reasons based off qualifications and merit. His reasons were, in my own words, because he couldn't trust him because of what happened during the election, which is political ideas, which is why that's discrimination based off political ideas.
Okay. Well, I think we have a call. Strap on those headphones. So let's get Catherine on the line. Catherine, you're on with Quentin and Nicole. Hi. Oh, all right. Hang on. Try it again. Okay. Hello, Catherine. You want to see if she's there? Sure. Hang on just a second.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we are.
There we are. Okay, now we've got you. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
So go ahead.
Okay, so I can't remember if deputies in the police are unionized. That's my first question. If they are, most government jobs have a strict set of requirements through HR for how disciplinary actions take place, and this seems like it's a disciplinary action. So to move a person down in grade, and this is irrespective of salary, usually requires a document trail of reasons why this is done, and a series of actions ramping up to the actual move, like from a letter of discipline to a leave with pay, to leave without pay, etc. So was that done? And if so, what were the rationale, or what was the rationale? And secondly, or thirdly, I should say, is this action against just the sheriff's department, or is the county as a whole?
Catherine, I'll address that question, or those three questions, and the first question is that there is a collective bargaining agreement that covers the sheriff's office, and the third question is, excuse me. The point, I guess, the point is that the investigation found there was none of that. There was
no paper trail.
There was no paper trail. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
What happened here was the collective bargaining agreement didn't apply because the sheriff captains aren't covered. They're not classified employees. So when you promote somebody to undersheriff and you promote them to captain, you remove them from the collective bargaining agreement.
Because they're not because now they're management, right?
Because now they're management. But think about it this way: these steps that are generally speaking required by collective bargaining agreements are also just common sense. And so, if you have a problem with someone's merit or their qualifications or their ability to follow instruction, this sort of thing, even if you're not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, you should be able to articulate those facts if you're going to take some adverse personnel action. In this particular case, the sheriff couldn't. He didn't. His reasoning was, well, I don't trust him because he ran against me in the election. And that doesn't have anything to do with merit or qualification. It has everything to do with the political perspective. Now, it's not party affiliation, obviously, but it's still politics are who gets elected. And so that was the only reason that the sheriff could give for demoting Clark, and consequently it was viewed as both discrimination and retaliation. And with respect to that third question, we brought the action against the sheriff's office, the sheriff, the undersheriff, and the county.
Okay, so there's basically 4 actions then, right?
Well,
or 4 litigants?
There's you could look at it that way. If you look at the county as a separate entity in the sheriff's office.
Because the county is the umbrella over the...
That's right. Ultimately, the person who's holding the bag on this is the county taxpayer.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. We're up against a break. Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, because a lot of people are confused by this Human Rights Bureau. I bet a lot of people didn't even know it existed. So is this like a playoff game before we go to real court, or what?
It depends on what the findings are. We can certainly file some other claims in district court, and we might very well do so. But as far as the discrimination, those have to be filed with the Human Rights Bureau. And because there was a cause finding, now we go to a hearing with the Human Rights Bureau. So we have to go through their administrative process first.
We're going to take a break. Come right back. 721, we're way overdue, in fact. Well, 721-1290 is our number. We'd love to have you weigh in. Again, this is all going on right here in River City. This is our town. We care. It matters to us because these men and women who work for the sheriff's office are our neighbors, they're our friends, our relatives. We go to church with them, whatever. 721-1290 is our number. Okay, we're back. 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. And John King's over there joining us in studio, Quentin Rhoades and Nicole Siefert. Okay, so go ahead, John.
Well, let's go back to Sunday. It's not that far ago, right? It's Thursday. It feels like it's in the rearview mirror, but on Sunday something happened that changed the ball game a little bit when it comes to this case. And I'd like you guys to talk about McDermott's opinion piece in the Missoulian just a little bit.
Well, we were confused a little bit by it because he said that he was putting a piece in the newspaper to avoid trying the case in the newspaper. And so it seemed to us that if you were trying to avoid trying the case in the media, that you would avoid the media. So we weren't sure what was motivating the fact that he would come forward like that. He's articulating some of his reasons for what he's done, some that he didn't articulate to the investigator, but on reflection, I think he found he needed more. And one of those would be, I'm not actually demoting the undersheriff when I put him on the graveyard shift. I'm just moving him around. But what they've said is that, when you're appointed as a captain or you're appointed to the undersheriff, that's not really a promotion, it's an appointment. But if you just think about it, again, applying your common sense, if you go from a supervisory position where you're in charge of a budget and personnel and an advisor to the sheriff himself to, the lowest peg on the totem pole, and you characterize that as an appointment rather than a promotion, you just have to defy the common sense definitions of those words. And, that's what people resort to oftentimes when they have a poor case factually, is they try to put a spin on it legally. And to us, it's just not convincing.
I have permission from Captain Tony Rio to share a couple of texts that he just sent in. Okay? I'm sorry, what's that?
I think we're ruffling some
okay,
feathers here.
Well, here we go. But again, this is good. This is a public forum, and we want everyone to be heard. So,
by all means.
By the way, sheriff, undersheriff, we don't have any standards for who calls in, really. If you want to call into the show and get on the air, 721-1290, the phone lines are open.
We'd love to have...
That goes for the public as well.
Yeah, the public. We have that Sheriff McDermott, Undersheriff Johnson, anybody. I'd love to have you call, 721-1290. This is an open forum. It says, and Captain Rio said, Peter, it might be nice to mention the Montana law pertaining to the undersheriff. TJ laid it out in his editorial. And then this second text is, Peter, it's incredible that I was successfully promoted 2 different times within the sheriff's office. I was promoted to corporal and then to sergeant. I was a sergeant since 2007. Josh Clark was promoted to captain from a regular deputy. He never successfully competed for any promotion. And then one more, it said the captain was an appointment by Sheriff Ibsen, not a promotion. So,
well, I'll take the first one.
Okay.
The sheriff did lay out the law, and so did the investigator in his findings. He quotes the law, and he says he actually disagreed with us. We thought that the statute protected Josh Clark, and the investigator said, nope, Rhoades and Siefert, Josh Clark, you're wrong. The statute does protect the sheriff. The sheriff can do what he wants. He can take people and put them back in positions as long as it goes along with collective bargaining agreements and all of that. But the investigator still found, in this case, that's not what happened. In this case, the sheriff made his decisions for the wrong reasons, and we're not allowed to do that.
Okay. So basically it goes to motive.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so let's tell you what, we are up against a break. So, Chuck, if you don't mind holding for just a minute, I want to give you plenty of time to make your comment at 721-1290. We have two other lines open. Again, this is, like John just said, this is an open forum. If you're a public official, if you're a commissioner, if you're a sheriff, if you're a whatever, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Go ahead, John.
That article that we referenced, I just linked it on our Facebook page if you want to see McDermott's side of the case that he laid out in the Missoulian on Sunday.
There you go. That's what it's all about. So we'll be right back. Thanks for joining us here on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Guests in studio, Quentin Rhoades, Nicole Siefert. What? Yes, I know we have a phone call. I was just getting to that, I promise. Okay, Chuck is on the line. Chuck, thank you for holding. Go ahead, sir.
Almost forgot me, huh?
Oh, no. What's on your mind?
Well, this is really an important discussion, but in a slightly different way. I'm never always exactly on target. But I know of nurses, doctors, teachers, professors, corporate people that have made comments to me in private. Don't trust the police. Don't trust the prosecutor. Don't trust the judges. Stay away from them. Don't do anything to get their attention. And this is why. They watch this nonsense going on, or how one officer isn't in favor of this officer, so he's punished. His career is ruined. And that is the image across the country of our police departments, is that if you get pulled over, and the poorer you are, the more that image stings. I watched a prosecutor on TV make a statement that the ticket couldn't have cost her more than $200. So why did she get so upset? $200 is life saving for some poor people.
I know.
And the criminal system, the law enforcement system, is something you should stay away from. Just like you stay away from organized crime. Just like you stay away from drug dealers.
Wow.
They're now. Do you understand what I'm kind of saying? These are nice, responsible people. All of my dealings with the Missoula Police Department over the past 30 years have been fantastic.
Me too.
But I know if I do something wrong in the wrong way with the wrong person, I could end up destroyed.
All right, thanks, Chuck. So your comments, any reaction to that?
Well, I think that to say that you don't trust, I mean, I'm not going to say the system's perfect. It's obviously not perfect, but the vast majority of law enforcement are excellent. They're trained carefully. They go through the academy. They're imbued with this understanding that because they have the power to arrest, because they have the power to take your freedom away, based on their own thought about probable cause, they don't go see the magistrate when they arrest you if they feel like they have to. You know, they take that responsibility very seriously, and they've got standards, and they've got training, and they've got supervision. And 99 times out of 100, you can trust the police. Now, in Montana, you know, we've got some distances involved and some manpower issues involved that sometimes they won't be there right the moment that you need them, especially with respect to the county. So, you know, but that has nothing to do with the integrity of the department or the officers. And, you know, we've been involved with police for, well, myself for, a 20-year career. And I can count on the fingers of one hand the instances where I found where I can't trust this officer. Now, I might disagree with them about something.
Right.
I might be cross-examining them about something in a trial. But it's not that I don't trust them, and I don't think that they're doing a good job and have integrity. So if people say they don't trust the police, that's fine. But that's not going to be my experience.
Go ahead, John.
I think I speak for a lot of Missoulians on this one. You know, and when you read about your sheriff's department in the paper over and over again, you do start to lose a little bit of trust. Now, I'm nowhere like on the point where I think all the cops are evil or anything like that, or that the police are running a mob sort of entity, which I absolutely don't. But there is part of me that says, if a police department operates best when the people that are best suited for positions are put in those positions because they're best suited for that job, and we have a sheriff's department where people are not put in those positions because of a political squabble, that does go to the integrity of the force. If what your argument is correct, people are not being put in the right position because of political squabbles. If that's true, then we have a less than optimal police force because of it, or deputy force.
Okay.
And that's harmful.
Allow me to jump in here. Okay, we have two separate organizations. We have the Missoula Police Department. We have the Missoula County Sheriff's Office. The police chief is appointed. Doesn't have to run for election. So all the things that happen within that organization are under a different umbrella. Okay, the county sheriff's office is elected, and because it's elected, it's political. And during and after all this mess, the clarion call that I had heard from myself and from hundreds of other people is, let's depoliticize law enforcement. Let's go to the legislature and find a way to make the office of sheriff and the district attorney nonpartisan, so that when they run for office, they don't have to prove that they're a real Democrat or not be a Republican, even though they grew up a Republican. You know what I mean? All that nonsense goes away. And so it's again, I think it's much more appropriate. I think it's much more beneficial. And I think it's a lot safer to run that way. That's just my opinion. So let's get back to the phone, and let's see. Who's up first? Greg. Greg, you're on Talkback. Hi.
Good morning, gentlemen.
What's up?
As far as law enforcement is concerned, I respect the individual officers completely. What scares me is the federal influence as far as funding is concerned. They come in with a bunch of money. They start different task force. They are more accessible when they're needed. The federal marshals are there. The FBI is there very, very quickly. And the influence of the federal government as far as money is concerned, they're using that as a carrot. And we hear about armored vehicles and military hardware and stuff like that given very freely to different law enforcement entities.
Okay.
And that's what scares me.
All right, thanks for the call. Jim, you're on Talkback. Hi.
Hi. Good morning, Pete. Everyone. Real quick question to your panel. If from what I understand, you are guys are just taking this little lawsuit kind of personally and not looking at the legal facts that the sheriff has operated within the boundaries of the law. And you guys are using the example of a tradition. Well, this should be done because of this tradition in the law enforcement. He was elected by the people to clean up the county and the nepotism and the corruption that was under Josh Clark and Carl Liston's administration. Those two people, he was the worst sheriff we've had. And now we get a guy in there that doesn't want to play the good old boy network, and you guys are upset about it because you guys didn't get your way. Hard cheese. That's the way of the world. Okay?
Hey,
over. Thank you very much.
Please stay. This is John. I'm not one of the attorneys. I'm just the talk show guy here. I wanted to because I'm not representing Clark or Sheriff McDermott. I'm just a regular citizen, and I wanted to get your take on this because this is the thing I would have a hard time dealing with if I was on your side of the argument. Why did the Human Rights Bureau come up with? Hold on, just a second. If you could just let me get the question out and then respond. All right. So the question is. The Human Rights Bureau, right? It's a third-party entity. It's not an attorney. It's not a law firm. It's a bureau that's put to task of investigating this and coming up with a decision. And when they came up with the decision that shows that these attorneys were right, how do you balance that?
Those attorneys were only right in the understanding. If you look at what the county attorney says, he didn't lose his pay, and the sheriff, McDermott, doesn't want someone like Josh Clark because he can't trust him, because he backslides him. You don't even understand the corruption that's going on inside there. All of their buddies work for each other. There is nepotism run rampant in the sheriff's department and at the jail.
Let me follow up real quick.
Okay,
do you mind if I follow up real quick?
Actually,
if you have a problem with nepotism, as was brought up earlier, right? Currently, McDermott is the sheriff in power. Two of the captains that were replaced, the old captains, were some of his biggest supporters. So it seems to me, if you want to be balanced on this, it's the same problem in this different administration, but you should be screaming at it just as loudly at both administrations.
We're way overdue for a break. I'm sorry, I have to play the, if you will, I have to play the traffic cop here. So we have Garth and Brenda who both want to visit. We have one line open, 721-1290. And remember, I must emphasize this, that the opinions that are stated on our program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff, management, or sponsors of this program. So I just want to get that out there just in case you're wondering. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Quentin Rhoades, Nicole Siefert joining us here in studio, local attorneys helping to handle the case of Josh Clark against the county sheriff's office. And just real quickly, before we get to Garth and Brenda, I cover the news, okay, is what I do. One of the things I do is I talk with Travis Welsh every day. I talk with Brenda Bassett every day. So I'm really pretty well connected with what's going on in law enforcement. Some positive things I've seen since Sheriff McDermott took office. They've got a whole bunch of brand new equipment. A lot of their equipment was old and outdated. They've got some new vehicles. They've hired some new deputies. So there are positive things happening there in the sheriff's office that I think needs to be to put out there. Yeah, they may have made some mistakes, and perhaps they'll be suffering for it. But we got to put the good with the bad. So let's get Garth on the line. Hi, Garth. You're on Talkback. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Good morning. Good morning. Say, I won't yell. I promise. I won't yell. Well, I do believe that the whole deal is the whole political thing is the problem. And if you look at Missoula itself, with liberal Democrats running everything, it doesn't work. The liberalism doesn't work. It falls apart, right? And because they're for political gain and for themselves. They're not really to better Missoula. But this is three examples. You look at our city council, they ban elephants and wild exotic animals. The mayor wasting all that taxpayer money on the lawsuit trying to buy mountain water. Attaboy. And now all this crap at the sheriff's office. And I see one thing in common with all of these three items happening. You know what it is?
What's that?
They all have a D behind their name.
Well, you know what? I would say that 90% of the people that serve in office in Missoula have a D behind their name. So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Actually, technically, City Council doesn't have D's or R's or L's or B's or Q's because they don't have parties.
A couple of quick texts here. Again from Captain Rio. Peter, please, one more. Why doesn't anyone ask about Josh Clark donating to Ibsen's campaign? Josh and his wife worked for and in Carl's campaign. Then Josh was appointed a captain by his friend Carl, skipping all the ranks. And then finally, the Human Rights Bureau did not make a decision. They just said there needs to be a hearing. So who wants to grab that one? Go ahead.
You know, that goes to Captain Rio's second question before that we didn't get a chance to answer. And he was talking about how there's a process within the union system on ranks below captain to compete for positions, that he had competed for positions to move from corporal to sergeant, and Clark hadn't, and this sort of thing. But understand that the question here is not whether Rio is qualified and experienced sufficiently to be a captain. That's not really the question here. The question here is whether the sheriff articulated a reason based on merit and qualification to demote Clark from where he should have been, according to the statute, as a captain after leaving the undersheriff position back down to the night patrol. And, you know, Sheriff McDermott never articulated the reasons why Clark was only qualified to be on the night patrol. In fact, you know, Clark has, the sheriff's office invested a great deal in Clark in training and academies and that sort of thing over the years. A lot of resources went into developing him as a captain and undersheriff, and then a lot of resources were going into paying him as a supervisor. And Sheriff McDermott decided to use those resources in the way of putting him back at the night patrol. It seems to me that we're not talking about whether Captain Rio is qualified. We're talking about whether it's a good use of county resources to take someone who's so highly qualified, highly trained, and highly paid and put him at the lowest possible rung. Now, there's only a certain budget for the number of captains that they can have in the office.
Right.
One of them was being paid as a captain to serve as a night patrol officer. Poor use of resources. And there was no reason articulated by the sheriff based on merit or qualification to do that. It was simply a political view.
Okay, so real quick, we have one minute before break.
Yeah, I want to throw it was actually brought up by the gentleman who was very fervent a few minutes ago.
Right.
And that's that the stated reason was that he could not trust Josh Clark. And if I were a manager and I felt there was someone in my office that I legitimately couldn't trust, I think that would be a valid reason to not put them at a higher level of responsibility. And so there's a lot of people out there in Missoula, including myself, that see this kind of drape over what's happened in the sheriff's office in the past. We've had a human rights investigation when Josh Clark was under sheriff that we don't really know what was going on. And then the one of the parties that sued in that case says he can't trust the party that was working for the sheriff. And I could understand why there might be some mistrust. So I guess my question is, why does a lack of trust, why is that not a good enough reason?
Okay, we're going to take a break. We have a 1 minute timeout. I'm sorry. I got to be the sheriff. Sorry, I got to be the cop. Anyway,
El Presidente.
I'm the commercial sheriff. So we're going to come right back after this 1 minute timeout. Brenda and Matt will try to get you both on. Stand by. Well, I wish you guys could be in the studio while the breaks are going, because we just had a wonderful explanation.
There was a great answer to my question.
Of John's question. So okay, Quentin, rewind. And
my question was, why isn't trust, a lack of trust in Josh Clark, why is that not a good enough reason for Sheriff McDermott to demote him to patrol?
Trust would be a great reason for that if you could articulate the elements of your lack of trust. For example, if Clark didn't show up on time, if he made bad arrests, if he's wrecked the police car, if he was insubordinate, those would be perfectly legitimate reasons for a lack of trust to demote him. But if the reason that you don't trust someone is because they ran against you for sheriff, and that's the only reason that you can articulate that's based on any facts or evidence, that's not a reason to demote someone, at least not in the public sector. Now, in the private sector, that might work. In the public sector, the law says that you can't be demoted without good, it's got to be based on merit. There's got to be qualifications involved, and you got to be able to point to those and articulate them, not just say, well, gosh, I can't trust the guy because he ran against me. That's not enough.
Let's get some calls in. Brenda, thank you for holding. You're on Talkback. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'll try to be quick. I have two examples of interaction with law enforcement, one very, very bad and one just as much the other way.
Okay.
Years back when my daughter was a teenager, she and her friend were out, and they stayed out after curfew. Two young police officers stopped them and told them that they were going to get a ticket, and they sounded really harsh with them, she said. And then after they wrote up the ticket, they told them, well, now, if you'll cooperate, we won't have to write this ticket, and we won't have to call your parents. And my daughter, who's kind of a spitfire, said, well, what do you mean by cooperate? And she said, meet us up in Patty Canyon.
Oh, man.
So my daughter, who fortunately had sense enough to fire back at him, said, you call my parents. Go ahead. Get them down here. I want you to. And later, when we went back down to meet with the sheriff about this incident, my daughter should have had a ticket for being out after curfew. Those guys should have been fired. But I can recognize that some kids that got a ticket might lie about that situation, too.
Right.
So there's that whole thing.
Okay.
Now, just recently I was in my yard, and I had a young lady who had run away from a group home.
Real quick.
Yeah, and anyway, the police were wonderful. They took care of her. They were gentle with her. They called a female officer for her. They were fantastic. I just loved the way they handled that young lady. So just they're people, I guess, is the long and the short of that.
Exactly. Thanks for the call, Brenda.
Yep.
All right, Matt, you're on Talkback. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to point out that all of this messing around that is happening with these public employees is at taxpayer expense. It's really not costing them anything. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thanks for the call. All right. So we have exactly 3 minutes to go. So here.
That was a really good point, and it brings me to a question I think a lot of Missoula residents are curious about. How much is this going to cost us? What's the next step?
Well, it depends what happens next. There's this 30-day conciliation period, and we had made an offer to the county, and we haven't received a response. We're expecting a response, and we might do mediation. We might not. We're discussing our options. How much is it going to cost taxpayers? That's too early to tell. I think one important question we need to ask is when we elect someone, how much are they costing taxpayers? Because this whole situation has been expensive for the county because retaliation has occurred and because discrimination has occurred. And so we need to remember that at our next election.
There have been lots of cases, especially since I've been covering the news, where the county or the city has been taken to court and lost and had to pay, various fines, whether it has to do with, what happened on the 3rd Street deal, the South Avenue deal, or whatever, the sidewalk deals or whatever it might be. And so don't think that the sheriff's department or the police department or the street department is alone. I mean, this happens all the time, and there are insurance policies that civic organizations, have to cover this. So
that was another thing I was going to bring up, and I'm not an expert on what sort of insurance the county has, but I do know that they have insurance, and they are also defending this in-house, and I'm guessing that's to save money.
I have asked this question of authorities before. How good is our insurance? Do we get dinged when we have more cases, etc.? And I was told that our insurance is really good and at a pretty good standing. But that's what I was told by someone who represented the city or the county at the time. So,
all right, let's see. Ask them how much they're suing for. They won't say, will they?
Oh yeah, we will.
Okay.
When a person of the seniority of Josh Clark loses his job, it costs money.
Right.
And there are two aspects of that. He was going to work for another 5 years and then retire. And the first aspect is the money that he would have been paid over that 5-year period, which amounts to something like $350,000. In addition to that, he would have retired at a much higher rate at the end of that 5-year period. And so the difference between what he is retiring for now and what he would have retired for at that time, if you add that up and reduce it to net present value over what you would expect his lifespan to be, about 75 years, you're looking at about $750,000. So that's what we're suing for. And that's what the sheriff's mistake here is going to cost the county. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal when you're making decisions about who your executives are going to be.
So that's the amount that you put out there for your proposal, right? And so they're going to look at that and try to negotiate and find something. I'm sure they'll try to find something.
And one of the
lower,
interesting things about that number is that's the proposal that we put forth prior to the finding by the Human Rights Bureau of retaliation and discrimination. So the county has to understand that the harder it fights, the longer this lasts, the more it costs.
Right. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So he quit. He retired on his own, right? So no, he was forced to retire. He made the decision, right?
He made the decision because it was essentially a hostile work environment. He couldn't work there any longer.
I hate to do this to you. We are completely out of time. I want to thank you both for being here. You're not billing us for the hours, are
no.
you? Thank God.
No.
The boss is
we'll
going,
we'll give you a discount.
You guys have a great day. And remember,
you too, Peter.
let's all support our law enforcement, okay? Have a great day.